And hello again from Fox News in Washington. When President Obama delivers his State of the Union speech Tuesday, one big issue will be sequestration. $85 billion in automatic spending cuts due to kick in March 1st. The White House now warns this will mean damaging layoffs of teachers, law enforcement, and food safety inspectors. And the Pentagon will be hit too. They propose a mix of spending cuts and, yes, more taxes through limiting deductions for the wealthy. I sat down late Friday with House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosie and asked her about the fast approaching deadline. Congresswoman Pelosie, welcome back to Fox News.
Welcome to the Capitol.
The White House says sequestration will have a severe effect on many Americans. House Republicans agree, but they say the answer is to find other spending cuts, not tax hikes.
Well, I think that sequestration is a bad idea all around. It should be something that is out of the question. The fact is we've had plenty of spending cuts, $1.6 trillion in the Budget Control Act. What we need is growth. We need growth with jobs. And if you have spending cuts, the education of our children and other investments like the National Institutes of Health, where you are hindering growth, you're not going to reduce the deficit. So what we do need is more revenue and more cuts. What I would like to see that is in a big, balanced, bold proposal. Short of that, we must do something to avoid the sequester.
But here's what House Speaker Boehner said this week.
At some point, Washington has to deal with its spending problem. Now, I've watched them kick this can down the road for 22 years that I've been here. I've had enough of it. It's time to act.
Congresswoman, let's look at the numbers. Are you really saying that in a government that spends $3.5 trillion a year, that increased federal discretionary spending by 14% over the last 4 years, you can't find $85 billion to cut to avoid the sequester?
Well, we have made the cut in terms of agriculture subsidies. There are tens of billions of dollars in cuts there, and that should be balanced with eliminating subsidies for big oil. Why should we lower Pell Grants instead of eliminating the subsidies for big oil?
But why not just cut spending? $85 billion in a $3.5 trillion government.
Well, let's just back up from, with all due respect to the Speaker, that what he said is not the gospel truth. The fact is that a lot of the spending increases came during the Bush administration. 2 unpaid-for wars that we got ourselves engaged in, a prescription drug plan that added enormous amounts to our spending, and the tax cuts for the high end that did not create jobs and create revenue coming in.
But
so
the
that's
total
how we
debt
got to
has
a place.
increased $5 trillion since this president came in.
Well, part of that is from what we had to do to avoid going over the cliff of a recession, a depression. Yes, we had the Recovery Act, which saved or created 3.5 million jobs. You know, the record of job growth in the private sector has been consistent for many record number of months. So again, we have to make a judgment about how do we get growth with jobs? That's where the real revenue comes from. You don't get it by cutting down your seed corn, cutting in education, cutting back on investments in science and National Institutes of Health, food safety, you name it. So it isn't as much a spending problem as it is a priorities. And that's what a budget is, setting priorities.
But you talk about growth. Even Christina Romer, the former head of the Council of Economic Advisors for the president, says you increase taxes, that also hurts growth.
Well, it's about timing. It's about timing, and it's about timing as to when you make cuts as well. The fiscal cliff, you raised taxes $650 billion right away. Yeah, and that was a very good thing to do on people making over the high end in our population. So here's the thing, though. We are here to have a budget that has revenue coming in, that has investments made into the future. We also want to make decisions in those 2 areas where growth with jobs are created, because more jobs, more revenue coming in. Nothing brings more money to the Treasury of the United States than investment in education of the American people. So we have to recognize that. which cuts really help us and which cuts hurt our future. And cuts in education, scientific research, and the rest are harmful, and they are what are affected by the sequestration. So it is almost a false argument to say we have a spending problem. We have a budget deficit problem that we have to address. Right now we have low interest on the national debt, and it's a good time for us to act to lower that deficit. We think the deficit and the national debt are at immoral levels. We think they must be reduced. We're sick and tired of paying interest on the national debt, and that's 15%. That's a large percentage of the budget, the interest on the national debt. It's lower now because of the lower interest rates.
But again, all I would say is we got a $3.5 trillion budget, and they're talking about $85 billion in cuts. Let's go to the taxes, though.
Okay, but before you leave spending, we agreed to $1.6 trillion in spending and discretionary domestic spending.
But the sequestration is just spending cuts.
Right. And secondly, we have gone to Medicare and had savings of over $1 trillion in Medicare already. When I say we, I mean the Democrats. And what the Republicans' budgets are proposing is to make a voucher of Medicare, no longer make it a guarantee. There are other things in this discussion that I think the American people have made fully
aware of. We're going to touch on them.
Understand what it means in their daily lives.
Let's talk about taxes. You keep talking about raising taxes. You talk about making the wealthy. Let me just ask the question first. But let me ask a question. You keep talking about making the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes. The top 1%, top 1% pay 37% of all federal income taxes. The top 5% pay 59% of all federal taxes. If you took the total income of everyone making more than $1 million a year, if you taxed it all at 100%, that's only $726 billion, which is less than the projected deficit for this year. I mean, the bottom line, Congresswoman, is you can't raise taxes enough to solve the deficit problem.
Nobody is saying that. We're saying it has to be balanced. Now, on the subject of the high end, we're not talking about raising rates. We did that. We eliminated the high-end tax cuts of the Bush years, which only increased the deficit and didn't create jobs. We kept the middle-income tax cuts. What we have in our proposal that Congressman Van Hollen has put forth, our top Democrat on the Budget Committee, is to say that we're going to eliminate subsidies on big oil. That gives us a lot of money, eliminating the subsidies for big oil.